All right, the NHL, while we have all these series going on, we'll have these four teams going at it in a round robin. The team that finishes first in the round robin, should there be a team that finishes first, and that's the thing too, a team that wins this round robin ends up being the number one seed in the East and second through fourth. But if they all tie, if it ends up being a wash, then the team that was first in the regular season, which would be Boston, would have the number one seed going into the round of 16. So these teams are all going to play 3 games in about a week and a half. So they're not going to be as battle hardened as the teams that are doing the play-in rounds. And you have to wonder if this is going to negatively impact them. So let's take a look at these 4 teams. And I'll do the same for the West on another date. I figured today was a good day to do this. There's not really a whole lot of news out there, and I thought, yep, let's dive into these 4 teams. We'll start with Boston. Now you'll notice up here I've got numbers. These are where they were on the power rankings at the time of the pause. Boston was number 2. 44, 14, and 12 overall. That 12 was problematic to me as a Bruins fan and sort of drove me nuts how they kept getting losses in overtime and shootouts, which got them points. They had 38 wins in regulation. I'm only looking at wins in regulation in this one rather than regulation in overtime, as I've been looking at in the play-in rounds, because the play-in rounds will have that unlimited overtime. These ones is more of a regular season overtime, and the regulation wins are a tiebreaker during... We didn't end up needing that. So yeah, they were number 1 in the league with a 714 winning percentage, the Boston Bruins. At times they look like a machine, and at other times they look kind of bored, and lack of motivation kicked in at certain times during the season. And it may have been that they were too far ahead of the second place team in their division. I'm not sure what it was, but there were points this season where they looked kind of like they lacked the motivation. 25.2% on the power play, 84.3% on the penalty kill. Their special teams numbers are excellent. You need to try to beat these guys 5-on-5. They were 7-3 in their last 10 going into the pause, so playing relatively well. In shootouts, if we go to a shootout, they're going to lose. They're 0-7 in shootouts, and this is part of the reason this year why I just stopped watching shootouts. I'd be like, oh, they're going to a shootout. Well, at least they got a point, and I would change the channel to a different game because I knew what was coming. Now, their schedule, again, there's going to be a couple of days in between each game. August 2nd, they're against Philadelphia. August 5th, they're against Tampa. And August 8th, they're against Washington. So they start off against the Flyers. That's a good test because the Flyers were the only team that I felt was hotter than them going into the break. Then they're against Tampa, and then they're against Washington. And, of course, Tampa Bay, they've got the division rivalry with Tampa Bay and Washington. They have a playoff history with Washington. So these 4 teams will be trying to get themselves into shape and motivated against one another. Players to watch for Boston, and again, these are just players to watch, and I know there's a whole bunch of others I could have put on the board, but I would have needed the 4-foot by 2-foot board, and nobody's got time for that. Pastrnak, 48 goals, 47 assists, 95 points. Pasta, pretty good year, just going to say, and I understand that right now he hasn't been playing, he's tested negative, so here's to hoping that continues to be the case, because if he weren't playing for the Boston Bruins, that makes a huge difference. Charlie Coyle, 16 goals, 21 assists is on the board because he has that big fat contract, and this is where he's supposed to earn it. The big games, the playoff games, this is what they're paying him for. And Jake DeBrusk, who's looking for a big paycheck once this season's officially done, 19 goals, 16 assists, 35 points. He's that draft pick they got in 2015 when they picked 3 guys in a row that everybody went, what? And he's the one that there was more, although Senyshyn, there was a lot of complaints too. There were a lot of complaints about DeBrusk as well. They could have got him in the second round. DeBrusk's turned out to be a pretty good player, pretty good goal scorer. Hopefully he stays in Boston. Zdeno Chara, 5 goals, 9 assists in what might be his last season. We just don't know. Is it his last year? Your guess is as good as mine. And in net, it has to be Tuukka Rask. Halak had an excellent season, yes, but it kind of has to be Rask. And is it going to be the Tuukka Rask that people love in the playoffs? Is it going to be the Tuukka Rask that people complain about in the playoffs? We'll see soon enough. So in the 3 tune-up games, I don't know how much intensity I expect from the Bruins. But from the Lightning, from Tampa Bay, there's a reason I'm wearing a Tampa Bay jersey. They were 8th on the power rankings. They'd gone on this really long winning streak, and then it all eroded from there. So they went from number 1 in the power rankings, which is I think where they were for like 3 or 4 weeks. and they started to drop. They were 43, 21, and 6 overall. 35 of those wins are in regulation. They were number 3 in the NHL with a .657 winning percentage. Their power play, 23.1%, best of these 4 teams on the board. Penalty kill, 81.4%. 3-6-1 in their last 10 going into the break. So yes, they were struggling going into the break. In shootouts, they only went to the shootout 3 times and they won 2 of them. So if we go to a shootout between Tampa Bay and Boston, Tampa wins it. August 3rd, they will play against the Washington Capitals. August 5th, they're against Boston. August 9th, they are against the Philadelphia Flyers. What's interesting here is they are the only team on this board that has 2 games within 2 days of each other, where they only have the 1 day off between the Washington game and the Boston game. But to make up for it, they have 4 days between the game against Boston and the game against Washington. Meanwhile, teams are doing the play-in. They're doing all 5 games during that same period. These teams will be playing 3. So, again, this is why I'm thinking that a team that's come out of a really hard-fought 5-game series might be fresher than these teams, or at least more ready for the fight than Tampa, Boston, Washington, Philly. Tampa has to watch against that. And I do still think Tampa has a good shot at winning something this year, because last year just had to sting that badly. Vasilevsky wasn't laughing at those jokes at the award show. Others were, not Vasi. Vasi's kind of choked. So Kucherov is their leading scorer, 33 goals, 52 assists, 85 points. And if you listen to people talk about Kucherov, well, he wasn't as good as last year. Nobody was as good as Kucherov was last year. I know, this is where people go. Leon Draisaitl's entered the chat. Yeah, I know. Cirelli, 16 goals, 28 assists, 44 points. This is where Cirelli makes his money. If he has a big playoff, he makes his money there. And Yanni Gourde might be looking to put what was a iffy season behind him, 10 goals, 20 assists. To me, he looks like the guy that probably is most vulnerable to being traded for when they need to make cap space. And this is important for him. And Sergachev, who's looking to get cashed out on, or looking to get paid out. 10 goals, 24 assists for Sergachev. Pretty amazing defenseman, considering he's played a lot of sheltered minutes in Tampa, and he's gradually working his way up. The kid's fantastic. He really is. And, of course, in net, you've got Vasilevsky. And like I said, Vasi, he's not joking around. And I would expect Vasilevsky to probably prove, even in this play-in round, hey, we are not messing around. I would not be surprised to see Tampa Bay win all 3 games. I would not be surprised to see them win all 3 games and secure the number 1 seed. Washington. Washington was number 11 on the power rankings. They had been kind of meandering. Here's the interesting thing, though. The last time they were meandering in the regular season and kind of was 2018. And this is a team that seems to do better when they're not as good in the regular season as it's. I don't know. It's weird. It's like they put all of their energy into the regular season, and then the playoffs come along and they just run out of gas. This year they weren't doing that. They were 41, 20, and 8. 31 of those 41 wins were in regulation. So 10 of those after 60 minutes. Number 5 in the NHL with a .652 winning percentage. So their winning percentage very, very close to Tampa. For the record, the only 2 Western teams in the top 6 in the NHL, St. Louis and Colorado. And so if you're a Penguins fan saying we should have an opportunity to be a top 4 team that gets to do a round robin, you have a right to complain. You probably do. So yeah, number 5 and 19.4% on the power play. Their power play ranks the lowest on the board. Their penalty kill, 82.6%. It is second on the board after Boston's. Now, they were 4-3-3 in their last 10. In shootouts, they were 4-3. So again, they're above 500 in shootouts. August 3rd, they play against Tampa. August 6th against Philadelphia. And August 8th against Boston. And I would anticipate some intensity in that last game against Boston as both teams ramp up. So, very, very solid scheduling, I think, in terms of how they decided who was going to play who when. So, Karlsson, of course, if you're a Caps fan, you likely see Karlsson as being the Norris Trophy winner. We'll see if that happens. 15 goals, 60 assists, 75 points. I am not saying he shouldn't be the winner. I'm just saying we'll see whether or not that happens. Ovechkin, 48 goals, 19 assists, 67 points. Really, really good season for Ovechkin. Not a surprise to anybody who's watched Ovechkin for more than a week. Tom Wilson. Is he going to make headlines for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? This year, 21 goals, 23 assists, 44 points. And I've said, I thought this year he cleaned up his game a lot. There really wasn't a whole lot of times I was watching games and going, wow, that Wilson, he's going to get suspended. He's going to get a call. I don't remember saying that at all this year, whereas previous seasons, definitely. Garnet Hathaway, 9 goals, 7 assists, 16 points. Watch for Hathaway once we get into the playoffs. Sandpaper and the ability to put the puck in the net here and there. Might be one of those aces in the hole for the Capitals. I've got Holtby on the board. He's going to be on a short leash, but I can't see Holtby not being the starter once we get into the playoffs. It is in the best interest of the Capitals to give Holtby that chance to show, hey, I'm the guy. I'm still the guy. I know Samsonov's coming along, but I'm still the guy. I can still do this. And he's got 3 good tests here. 3 pretty darn good teams that are going to give him a run for their money. So we'll see whether or not the Capitals, over this tournament of sorts, end up coming out of this round robin with a top seed. Now, Philadelphia, they were number 1 in the power rankings going into the break. And they're number 6th overall in the NHL, but they were just steamrolling. 41, 27, and 7. They had 31 regulation wins as well. They were number 6 in the NHL with a .645 winning percentage. Their power play, 20.8%. Their penalty kill, 81.8%. So their special teams, pretty average, but they were 9-1 in their last 10 going into the pause. Anytime anybody's asked me, so which team gets hurt by the pause? Philly. Philly was the best team in the league. They were absolutely steamrolling their way, not necessarily to Boston. I don't think they would have caught Boston, but I think they were gonna pass the Caps, and I think they were gonna give Tampa a run for their money. I think Philadelphia was absolutely legitimately a contender this year. As we get to the pause, they were 5-5 in shootouts, so they went to the shootout 10 times, and they got 15 points in shootouts overall. 10 with the wins, 5 in the losses. August 2nd, they're against Boston. They have 4 days then between that game and when they play Washington on the 6th. And then they have a couple of days before they play Tampa. So the schedule is very lax for Philadelphia. And here's the thing. As a fan, do you want to look and say, well, our team has the most days off in between games of any other team in the play-in round, or in the round robin? Does that make you feel more nervous about going into the play-in round, or does it matter? And that's a question that we're going to have answered pretty quick, whether or not these games matter. I would think by the time we get to the game between Washington and Tampa Bay on day 2 of this, we will know whether or not this matters to the players once we've seen each team play 1 game. Now, Konechny's the leading scorer for Philadelphia, 24 goals, 37 assists, 61 points. Came into his own this year, absolutely. He's going to be a leader of this team for years to come. Claude Giroux, 21 goals, 32 assists, 53 points. So his points per game drop, but this is where you want to see Giroux really earn his money, and he does want a Stanley Cup before he retires. This might be one of his best chances to do it, really. Matt Niskanen, a underrated defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers, 8 goals, 25 assists, 33 points, has been an excellent stabilizing influence on that blue line since he came in, and so I felt like I should throw him onto the board. And Shane Gostisbehere, 5 goals, 7 assists this year. Ghosts, he's overdue. Ghost is overdue for like a couple of really big games and a really, great story out of this. And we'll see if coming out of the round robin, we're talking about how Ghost is back and Vigneault has confidence in him now, and things look great if you're Philadelphia. Carter Hart's the goaltender, and that is a very interesting dynamic as well. Carter Hart, I think, is the ultimate X factor for the Philadelphia Flyers because they haven't had that starting goaltender, that young starting goaltender, that go-to guy that they feel like they can rely on. I'm going to say since Hextall in the late 80s. That it's been that long since you can look at a goaltender in the Philadelphia net and say, this guy's going to be the guy for maybe the next decade. And Carter Hart is that. So Hart, Holtby, Vasilevsky, Rask, those are 4 pretty big names in net, and Hart's going to do his best to show that he belongs with those other 3 as we get ready to decide who's going to be the top seed. And the question we have out of this is, because we're going to have these in a hub city, these guys are all going to be playing in Toronto, and the first 2 rounds are going to be in Toronto, and then you go to Edmonton for the conference finals and the finals. Does home ice really matter? Because there really isn't any. And I know people are going to say, well, Toronto has home ice. Not really. I mean, you have, it's your arena, you know it, and yet these teams are all going to know it pretty quickly too, once we get into the the play-in round. I would think that home ice advantage lasts for Toronto for maybe the first period of game one, and then it's all off after that. Because again, we've seen a league now with more parity, and where home ice doesn't necessarily mean that much. You look at last year's playoffs, it really didn't matter that much. So, circling back to this, does that lack of home ice necessarily meaning a whole lot mean we're going to be in a situation where maybe these teams don't, I'm not going to say they don't take it as seriously, but maybe we're not risking injury in the round robin, and maybe it doesn't matter as much to the coaches about where they finish in the seeding as it does about just being ready for the playoffs. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.